Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content.
September 1297. Outside the English stronghold of Stirling Castle in Scotland. Clad in chainmail and riding on massive war horses, the English army advances along a narrow bridge over the River Forth, a river known in Gaelic as the Black River. The bridge is only wide enough for two horsemen to ride side by side, but the English heavy cavalry is vaunted and deadly, and all that awaits them on the other side is a small group of disorganized Scottish rebels. The knight's orders are clear: destroy these rebels and secure the region for King Edward I. Two by two, the English knights cross, until nearly 2,000 of them have passed along to the other side of the bridge and formed up in battle lines. They face only a few thousand Scots. It shouldn't be much of a fight. But then, with a blood-curdling battle cry, there emerged from the forest a massive throng of angry Scotsmen, thousands of them charging down from every direction, armed with claymores, spears, beards, and kilts. They descend upon the English, who are now struggling to bring the rest of their troops through the traffic jam on the bridge. This is the Battle of Stirling Bridge, and it will be a massacre. It becomes the greatest victory for Scotland's greatest hero, William Wallace, and puts the people of Scotland on course that will lead to their independence. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am here with badass producer Andrew Jacobs. Andrew, how's it going? Great to have you back on the show again.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm deep in some edits for a book I'm trying to finish up, so I've kind of had my head in the sand for the last week or two.
Yeah,
which is okay because I think all the news these days is like election stuff, which just stresses me out.
It is very, I don't know, you've got football and the election. I think baseball, I'm a Giants fan. Baseball season's over.
I'm doing the typical Mariners thing. I'm a Mariners fan, so we're doing the standard thing where the last 2 weeks of the season, you need to find a way to make up 5 games.
Classic.
Yeah, and exactly. And then they'll, I'm sure, like lose it on the last day of the season as usual.
Yeah. Speaking of election stuff, and don't want to get political, but I don't know that this is badass. This is more like bizarre of the week, bizarre story of the week. But did you hear about the RFK Jr. whale head thing?
No, I did
not.
I mean, I turned news notifications and uninstalled all social media around the time of the 2016 election, I think, and it like dramatically improved my life in a lot of ways. So I don't get any of this. What's happening with the whale
is the
head.
entertaining part. So he's being investigated all of a sudden by NOAA. Which I didn't realize that NOAA, which is the National Oceanic, whatever.
The Oceans Administration.
Yeah, the government's
the weather guys.
The government's ocean department. He's being investigated by NOAA because he told a story about how, I don't know how many years ago this was, but he and his family came across a beached whale, and he decided that he wanted to get the blubber of the whale for some reason. So he chopped off the head of the whale and then put it on top of their car, his family's station wagon. And then they drove, to wherever they were driving. And he described it as there was whale oil, seeping into the car. They had to drive with I don't know, garbage bags on their heads or something, because it was so rancid.
This is separate from the bear story, right? Because I heard about the bear story where he dumped a dead bear in Central Park.
Yeah, he found some bear roadkill and put it in his station wagon. He's like, I'm going to eat this or whatever it was. And then he went to a party in New York and he's like, oh crap, I've got a dead bear in my trunk. What should I do with it? I'm going to put it in Central. Here's his idea. I'm going to put it in Central Park and stage it like it got hit by a bike.
Hit by a bike?
So Yeah, dead bears, dead whales.
Uh-huh. And so now they're sending Dirk Pitt and Numa after him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So no wonder he was pulling it like 2%. I mean, weird dude. But there is something ever so slightly badass about, I have to imagine, about watching your dead saw off like the head of a whale. I don't know why you would do it.
I picture this. I'm picturing a scene in like a comedy, like a Dumb and Dumber kind of thing, where like, I'm picturing this probably way funnier looking than it was.
It's more like a quirky comedy where the dad does things that are inexplicably bizarre.
Dad.
Yeah, and there's the social worker who's like, we got to take these kids away from this dad. This isn't right. And by the end, the social worker realizes that he just parents in his own way. And they probably fall in love. There's
yeah,
and if my voice sounds a little bit like RFK Jr.'s, it's because I'm getting over a cold. So there you go.
I'm coming down with one, so we'll all have this together. So I mean, okay, let me attempt to transition here. Speaking of decapitations and
great.
and traveling severed heads, we're gonna have some of that in this story.
Nice.
But today we are dealing with one of the old classics, one of the most requested, most viewed, most famous articles on the website. We're going to talk about a guy who is kind of unequivocally, with the whale story. I'm not entirely confident labeling that as badass beyond all question. However, William Wallace is, and that's the story that we're going to tell today, which is about one of the greatest heroes in Scottish history and how he helped contribute to the independence of his country by killing a lot of people with a 6-foot claymore.
And yelling, freedom!
You've seen Braveheart, right? That was prerequisite for watching this. I had to rewatch it before this episode. But
that was a documentary, right?
It was almost entirely accurate, yes.
Yeah.
I will say I have very happy memories of Braveheart, though. It was the first time I saw a leg get chopped off on film.
I have some vivid memories of this movie, but we can talk about that after the break.
Absolutely. Let's do that. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson. I'm here with producer Andrew Jacobs, and we are talking about William Wallace and the War of Scottish Independence. And while the War of Scottish Independence generally sounds like the War of American Independence, you picture people writing things down and giving, give me liberty or give me death, giving these big speeches, this big political movement. The War of Scottish Independence is a little bit less organized than that. And it begins not so much by a group of people declaring that they want freedom, as much as it begins in the way that most wars began in the Middle Ages, which is the king died and there was a succession problem, which is kind of the story of all wars between, Rome and basically the American Revolution.
Got to start somewhere.
Yes. So in 1296, the King of Scotland is an independent country and England is an independent country. The King of Scotland ceases to be the King of Scotland. Reign passes to his 2-year-old daughter. There's a little bit of debate over whether
that's going to work out.
Yeah, whether people are willing to be ruled by someone who is not toilet trained yet. Anyway, then the 2-year-old daughter dies, and now there is a complete gap. And the Scots, they have their own nobility, but, kings are passed down the way that they have been passed down forever. There's nobody in line. All these nobles are kind of squabbling over who should be the next king of Scotland. And so the Scots, they can't agree on it. So they make a very unwise decision, and they go to the King of England and they say, King Edward Longshanks, King Edward I of England, who do you think should be our king? We can't figure this out. We need you to come arbitrate this dispute.
Oh, gosh.
And King Edward the First of England, he's called Edward Longshanks because he has long arms, possibly other things. We know him as the Hammer of the Scots. He really doesn't have a lot of respect for Scottish independence. Scotland has traditionally not, has been back and forth as to whether it's part of the English crown or not. And we were talking about Braveheart. He's played by Patrick McGoohan in Braveheart, but the character that I always think of with Edward Longshanks is when George Martin did Game of Thrones, he based Tywin Lannister off Edward Longshanks.
I see it.
So I always kind of picture Charles Dance as Tywin Lannister when I think about Edward the First of England.
See, now that you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, those two characters in both those shows are very like, boss man, take no guff guys.
This guy he's at the time that this happens, he's older, and he has already been kicking ass everywhere. Wales was independent. He goes into Wales. He destroys Wales. He builds the biggest castle in Wales. He's fighting wars in France. He's expanding all over the place. He's a warlike king. He's a warrior. He takes like you said, he takes no guff from anybody. Hand fillets the deer that he's killed himself in his backyard, right? So they ask him, who do you think should be the King of Scotland? And he goes up to Scotland and he says, okay, I choose myself to be the King of Scotland. Succession problem over.
Good one, guys.
Yep. The Scottish nobles, they have a problem with this. So he sends his army into Scotland. He sacks Berwick. He defeats the Scots at the Battle of Dunbar. He arrests most of their nobility. He installs Englishmen loyal to him to rule over every important thing in Scotland. And then he steals the Stone of Destiny. The Stone of Destiny is a big rock that has historically been in the possession of the King of Scotland. I don't know what the backstory is here, but it sounds like an adventure movie.
I think Nicolas Cage is currently working on finding that in
the new National Treasure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, National Treasure 4.
Yes. So Edward, it's there. It's in the castle in Scotland. Edward takes it. He brings it back to England. He takes it to London. He puts it under his coronation chair at Westminster Abbey, and it is still there to this day.
Oh, damn. He sits on it.
He sits on it. I have the Stone of Destiny. I am the King of Scotland. I'm going to sit on it. You can come take it if you don't like that.
That's some serious disrespect.
Yes. We are going to talk about William Wallace being a badass, but Edward Longshanks is also a badass. So this is one of these great stories from history that is kind of badass on badass action.
All right.
Okay. So great. Everything's coming up Longshanks. He's the king now. Everything's great. And this is around the time that we are going to introduce William Wallace to the story. William Wallace was a Scotsman, but he wasn't, a big political leader type guy. He wasn't giving speeches about how Scotland should be independent and take up arms against the English. He believed in independent Scotland, and he didn't like the English kind of moving in on Scottish territory, but He wasn't, really planning on being a revolutionary leader. So the story that we have on him is different from the Braveheart version. There was a traveling medieval minstrel named Blind Harry who wrote William Wallace's story. And we can assume that he may have taken some creative license. In one of the books I wrote, I make a joke that he probably didn't see it firsthand, but... but yeah, so the Blind Harry version of the story is that Wallace was out drinking beer and fishing in the Scottish town of Lanark, and he caught a bunch of fish. He's on his way home, and there's these 5 drunk English soldiers standing guard on the road, and the English are kind of occupying Scotland at this time. One of these soldiers is like, "Hey, give me those fish that you just caught." And Wallace is like, I don't want any trouble. You guys can have half. I still got to go home and feed my family. Anyway, that doesn't work for the English guys. They tell him if he doesn't hand over the food, they're going to arrest him and have him executed for treason. So,
all right, that's they really escalated that.
Yes. And so, what I like to say with Wallace is, we know that he went into battle with a 6-foot claymore, and this is a time period in which most people, the average human, stands about 5'4", and there's some estimation that Wallace might have been close to like 7 feet tall. He's like a giant, right? And so maybe that's why they're messing with him, because he's got to do what they say, and they're trying to push him around or whatever. I don't know how much that has to do with
Wait, you
it.
think they think he was 7 feet tall? Like, you think he was like a 6'10" guy?
Yeah, like
LeBron
6'8", 6'9",
James?
something like that. Yeah, we don't know for sure, but that is a speculation about him. We don't know exactly for sure. But anyway, they're messing with him. They're like, we're going to have you executed for treason if you don't give us all the fish. So he takes his fishing pole and bashes it over one of the guys' heads, takes a sword and kills all 5 guys with it.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Then he just kind of goes back home. He goes to his girlfriend's house and he cooks up the fish for dinner for them. He's a good boyfriend and he's a badass. And the English sheriff comes by. Like, the sheriff is the sheriff of Nottingham kind of sheriff, right? He's the leader of the English troops in town. He comes by to her house to arrest Wallace. And she says,
just imagine the girlfriend being like, Billy, what'd you do?
That's the 3rd time this week you've been coming home covered in blood.
Damn it, Billy. She's like hitting him, chasing him out of the house.
Yeah. So the sheriff finds out pretty quickly that there's 5 dead Englishmen in town and figures it out, goes to her house to find out where's Wallace to arrest him, but he's not there. And the girlfriend says, I don't know where he is. I have no idea. I'm not telling you anything.
She's covering up for him.
Yeah. She's an accomplice. And aiding and abetting a fugitive is a bigger deal then than it is now. And due process of law was not really a big thing in 13th century Scotland. So the sheriff just has her executed on the spot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
Yes, that is harsh. That was also a big mistake.
Big mistake. Can we pause now just to reconcile this with the movie?
Yeah. So the movie's a little different, right?
Yeah. So in the movie, he like falls in love. He gets like secretly married with his like childhood sweetheart who gave him pressed flowers before he left town. Now he's back. And they have this whole thing about prima nocte,
right.
that they've instituted in Scotland, which is some serious business. For those who don't know, it is the idea that the lords or the king get to sleep with a newly wedded woman before she sleeps with her new husband. Gets to take her to bed. There's some question though as to whether or not this is like how real it was in general.
There's question as to whether prima nocte ever existed. People talk about it. I mean, there's a lot of commentary on it, but it could be like there is some argument to be made that this was like inflammatory stuff that people made up to make people not like the king, right?
Kings in general. It seems like this was an idea that bandy. It was sort of, there's different languages. This comes up in different languages, different countries. My guess is like someone probably, it might have been like propaganda, and then someone was like, "That sounds like a good idea," So it probably happened here or there. But anyway, that's what the movie does.
Yes, but it was not an institutional thing, but it was like kind of an inflammatory thing to make people hate the nobility, which is still effective in 1998 for this movie. It makes you immediately hate the nobility.
Oh yeah, you're like, great. whoa. And so they do that whole thing. She refuses. They end up killing her, and now William Wallace is angry.
Yes. So what does he do in the movie?
Oh, he shows up in town and kills all the soul. He gets his buddies, and they all show up, and they overtake this little fort and kill all the Brits.
Yeah,
the English, I should say, to be more correct.
Right, because I think Scottish people are Brits. I don't know how this 4 countries in 1 country thing works. Well, yeah. So that's what he does in this story too. In Blind Harry's version of the story, he's catching fish. They want the fish. He doesn't give it to them. He beats him to death with a fishing rod. They kill his girlfriend. He shows up with some buddies, kills that sheriff, slaughters the entire English garrison at Lanark, and then like recruits an unruly band of disenfranchised Highlanders and goes on a rampage, killing anybody that he can get his hands on.
Hell yeah.
Which is how this begins. It does not begin with like big speeches about, oh, maybe we should protest these taxes. It's just like, you kill my girlfriend, I'm going to kill everybody in the world.
Yeah. Right.
That's great. It's a straightforward revenge flick, right? I like it. And so, so he starts escalating, right? There's this place called Loudon Hill where he ambushes, there's 200 English cavalry, like horseback guys in armor. And they get lured into basically like a cul-de-sac surrounded by mountains. And the Scots all kind of jump down from the mountains and knock everybody off their horse and kill them all.
They have the high ground.
They have the high ground, yeah. There's another place called Ardrosian Castle where there's this very heavily fortified British or English fort. And Wallace doesn't have any kind of siege weaponry or anything like that, so he can't attack the fort. So what he does is him and his buddies hang around outside the fort and kind of scream and yell at the English until they ride out to fight the Scots. Yeah, they taunt them. They stand outside of arrow range and they like show them their butts or whatever, and they yell and scream and challenge them. And eventually the English ride out. And when they do, there's like a lot more Scottish people like hiding in the woods all around, and they run out and cut off their retreat and attack them and kill them all. And so, he was just kind of on this vengeance quest, and he sets Ardrosian Castle on fire. He slaughters the garrison at Lanark. He's taking towns and supply depots, and and the English are out of their home country. They're in kind of occupying Scotland, and Scotland starts getting upset. And before long, you start having this generalized revolt against English rule, because the Scottish were independent not that long ago. And they want to be that way again. So they either launch their own guerrilla attacks or they join Wallace's band. And William Wallace and the Scots, they were kind of this unruly mob, and now they're becoming an army, and they are capturing English strongholds. They're capturing supply depots. They retake Scone Castle, where the Stone of Destiny was, and they drive the English out of Scotland. Okay, great, that's a success. However, that's not the sort of thing that's going to sit well with Edward Longshanks.
No.
Edward Longshanks, when this happens, is off in France fighting the French, in Aquitaine and Lombardy.
Because that's just what they did.
Right, that's just what they did. Always in France fighting the French people. And so he was out there and was like, what's going on here? He gets word that the Scottish have revolted and thrown the English out of Scotland. And so what does he do? Well, he has a bunch of his senior officers executed, and then orders the survivors to launch a full-scale attack on William Wallace and defeat him.
Always good for morale.
Yeah. You are in command now, Admiral Piet.
Yeah. The last guy stunk, so
yeah, they're all
dead. You do better.
Yeah, killed all those guys. Sent a second group of guys. You're in charge now. Like, you figure it out. I can't be bothered. I'm busy here. I'm fighting the French. Like, you guys can handle these peasants, right? I got to fight like a real army here. So the backup guys, the bench warmers, are now the commanders. They lead an attack into Scotland, and William Wallace is waiting for them at a place called Stirling Bridge. And Stirling Bridge is one of these, like, they still teach it at West Point as like one of the classic errors in military strategy.
Yeah.
There's a big river. The English are on one side of it. The Scottish are on the other side of it. And there's a bridge that goes over this river, and the bridge is not very wide. And
it's like, 3 people wide or something?
Yeah. So you can get 2 horses side by side across it. And the river is big enough and fast moving enough that you can't just cross it, especially because in these days, everybody's wearing armor. Wallace kind of does what he did at that castle. He puts a pretty small army on the Scottish side that are visible. He puts them out of arrow range. The English start marching their infantry across the bridge. Once kind of enough of them are across the bridge, a bunch of Scottish guys come running out of the forest on all sides and start attacking them. The English are like, oh, crap, like there's way more of these guys than we thought there were. We got to attack. So they send the heavy cavalry, which are the knights. They're wearing chainmail. They're not like the knights in shining armor that you picture. These guys are mostly wearing chainmail, but heavy knights with lances and big horses, and they're trying to fight their way across this bridge. Wallace waits until about, a small percentage of them get across. Then he has like basically pre-sabotaged the bridge to be like destroyed by basically pulling a wire. And as the entire bridge is clogged with English cavalry, he brings the bridge down and they all go into the river and drown. And then all of those English are still stuck on the Scottish side, like a bunch of cavalry, a bunch of infantry. There's no escape. The Scottish come in and they just wipe them out. They kill them all.
That was definitely a tactical error.
Yes. You're just overconfidence. The same trick worked twice, right? Like, hey, come and get us. We're over here.
Yeah.
They kill all of the English who have crossed they take no prisoners, including the commander of the English forces, the guy who was put in charge by Longshanks to replace the guys who he had already executed. William Wallace finds that guy's body, tans his skin, and turns his skin into a sword belt and scabbard and matching sandals.
Whoa. Hold on. Are you saying William Wallace skins the dude, takes his skin off, turns it into like luggage?
Yeah. Accessories. Yeah. Sword belt, a scabbard, and sandals.
That is gnarly.
That's like Hannibal Lecter. That's like Hannibal Lecter stuff, right? Yeah. And the rest of the English army, they can't continue. They don't have enough guys. They have to retreat. They're in enemy territory. They're surrounded. They're getting attacked the entire way back to England now by these hit and run raids, and they've lost a huge percentage of their force, and they have to retreat in disarray. And then Wallace even launches a campaign.
Well, so hold on. Oh, were you going to say across the bridge or across the border?
Across the border, yeah. So
hold on. Let me, because I want to stop and compare to the movie for a sec. Mm-hmm. In the movie, first of all, no one gets skinned in the movie.
No,
there's no human skin luggage in the movie. For some reason, I don't know why. But what's curious about the movie, and this is where I guess
it's an apocryphal story, so maybe it didn't happen. But
I believe it's true.
I choose to believe that it did.
100% true. In the movie, though, there is, I guess this is how we know it's not a documentary. And as I hope you know, I am joking here. At the Battle of Stirling in the movie, which is like the first big battle.
Yeah.
There's no bridge.
There's no bridge.
There's no bridge in the movie.
No, there is no bridge in the movie.
Minor detail.
Yes.
Like, what the heck?
So I'll tell you, the trick in the movie is where they wait for the cavalry to get close and then they raise the spears on them.
Yeah.
We will see that later. So that is based off of, there is some precedent for that story. That just wasn't the Battle of Stirling Bridge.
But they took out the bridge. I wonder if it was a budget thing, because all I'm just imagining, it would have been pretty awesome to see like a bridge collapsing and a bunch of dudes falling and stuff.
Yeah,
but that sounds expensive for 1990.
Spoken like a producer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So yeah, the English are defeated. They're driven out of Scotland. Wallace even launches attacks into England. He raids into Northumberland and attacks some villages and towns there, some English towns, and makes his way back to Scotland. Wallace is a huge hero now, and this is where he he's given the title Guardian of Scotland and Leader of its Armies by Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce is going to be a character who we've just introduced now, but he will be part of this story. He is Robert the Bruce is a nobleman, and he is the guy that is kind of the front runner to be the new king of Scotland. They were like, all right, we'll figure it out ourselves. It's probably gonna be this Robert the Bruce guy. He's pretty awesome. So Robert the Bruce knights Sir William Wallace now and gives him the title Guardian of Scotland and Leader of its Armies. okay, this is success. This is a great victory for William Wallace. He was an outlaw, become bandit leader, and now he's a knighted defender of his country. Great.
He was fighting for revenge. Now he's fighting for
freedom.
Freedom. Yeah. Okay.
Well, one problem, and that is that we still have Edward Longshanks out there. He's in France and he's killing French people, and he gets word that like the backup guys couldn't handle it either, and he says, "Okay, well, I'm gonna have to take matters into my own hands."
All right.
So we are gonna take a really quick break, and when we get back, we're gonna finally get that showdown of Longshanks versus Wallace.
Nice.
So stick with us. All right, welcome back. We have seen William Wallace defeat the English and drive them out of Scotland. But now Edward Longshanks, the Hammer of the Scots, he's really riled up. And it's becoming very obvious that if he wants all the Scots to be killed and subjugated, he's going to have to do it himself. So he has to make peace with the French. He ends the war in France because he needs to commit his troops. He's lost so many troops. He needs the manpower.
Yeah. William Wallace bringing peace to the world.
Yes, he brought peace in Europe. So he has to declare peace in France, calls his troops home, and then like commits the entire English army to destroying this rebellion. So he crosses 30,000 Englishmen and Welshmen into Scotland to have a showdown with William Wallace. And, you know, Longshanks has 30,000 guys, and Wallace has like 6,000 guys. So he's outnumbered 5-1.
Okay.
On top of that, it gets worse because the English army, these are all kind of battle-hardened. These are the A-line troops. These are the battle-hardened guys who've been fighting in France. A lot of them have these longbows with this huge shooting range, penetrate armor at extreme distance. It's got a lot of these guys. And he's got heavy cavalry. And even worse than that, he's not going to fall for these stupid tricks that these other guys keep falling for. And then on top of that, he went around to the Scottish nobility that were not Robert the Bruce and offered them money and land and titles and power if they would just not fight him. And so
he's deploying a strategy, that's for sure.
Yes. So Wallace shows up with 6,000 guys at the Battle of Falkirk. Longshanks has 30,000. And of those 6,000, a decent percentage of them just ride off and do not fight for the Scottish. So he's outnumbered even more than he thought he was going to be. He does some fairly clever tactical stuff, and it's not enough. The heavy cavalry charge, William Wallace's personal position. He personally kills the master of the English Knights Templar in single combat during the fight, which is pretty awesome.
Oh, cool.
They're trying to take him alive, and he kills the master of the English Knights Templar, and he gets away. His army is defeated. They're crushed, but he escapes, and he goes to France for a while to try to recruit the French to help him. Like, hey, can you just start that war up with England again? It was like awesome for us when you were doing that. This is where in the movie he meets Sophie Marceau, and there is some conspiracy, like medieval conspiracy theories that Sophie Marceau in this movie plays a woman named Isabella, the she-wolf of France. I'm going to talk about her in a little bit. She's awesome. But there is some conspiracy theories that her son, Edward III, King of England, was actually with her, and William Wallace's son.
I dig it. Let's do it. Sign me up.
Yeah, they allude to it in the movie, and there is some question about this. But anyway, so Edward Longshanks, he defeats the Wallace's forces. He moves on. Robert the Bruce raises an army to try to fight him. Robert the Bruce is crushed by Edward Longshanks. Robert the Bruce has to flee to Ireland, where he can find other people to commiserate on how much the English suck. But Edward Longshanks retakes Scotland. He holds it for a few more years and rules it with an iron fist. Wallace, after being in France for a while, comes back to Scotland to try to reorganize a resistance, but the guys he's talking to sell him out They hand him over to the king, and Edward Longshanks has William Wallace dragged naked through the streets of London. They cut off his balls, they behead him, they disembowel him, they set his organs on fire, they dismember his corpse, and then they publicly display different parts of his body across England and Scotland.
That's pretty rough.
It's pretty rough. It was called being hanged, drawn, and quartered, and that's what happens to him. And that's pretty bad. But also, it's kind of badass to have your disembodied corpse displayed all over the country.
If you gotta go, I mean, after
pissing off the king so badly that's what that's how he chooses to deal with you. And he's like, this is what happens to people who rebel against me.
Yeah, the movie kind of went there. They didn't go so graphic. I think later stage Mel Gibson might have gone further.
It would have been like part 2 of the movie, like Braveheart 2 would have just been him being
just cut into pieces. Yeah.
So, okay, you'd think that'd be the end of the story, except that this is William Wallace, and William Wallace is this inspirational dude who just through his own desire for vengeance and like blood vengeance or whatever, blood rage, could inspire all of Scotland to fight with him. When he is cut up and dismembered and his body parts are hung all around Scotland, the Scottish people, they get pissed off. They don't like this. This is not going to work for them. They're like, what'd you do to William Wallace? He was awesome. We love that guy. You're going to hang his severed limbs outside of the freaking town square here? So they take up arms again. They launch another revolution. They're so upset about this that these groups start going around killing English soldiers. They try to do reprisals, but they're getting attacked. And suddenly there's another revolution in Scotland. Robert the Bruce gets excited about it. He comes back and starts to take control of it, organizes these guys, raises this army again. And in 1307, he declares an independent Scotland, and with himself as the king. And they kill all the English. They throw them all out of Scotland.
There you go.
All right. Now, Edward Longshanks is still in London. He's still alive. He's been beating the Scots up for the last 30 years. He's like, time to do it again. Give me my boots. He's still sitting on that stone of destiny. He's still got to like get out there and all right, here we go. Get the army. Call everybody up. We're going back to Scotland. So the Hammer of Scotland, he's a very old man at this point, but he's going to do it personally. He's not even going to entrust this to his subordinates. He has his son now, Edward II, and Edward I and Edward II, they are going to go lead this army out. They march across the River Forth into Scotland. It'll be Edward's 3rd time beating up the Scottish, except that not long after crossing the river, he just like drops dead of old age.
Yeah, he was due.
It was time. Yeah, he doesn't get a chance.
Scotland got him. They got him.
Eventually, they got him. Edward Longshanks' last words to his son, Edward II, are, continue to press the attack and take my dead body and put it on the throne and carry it at the head of the army so that they'll see me and it will strike fear into their hearts and you'll defeat him.
Oh, that's pretty good. We got a lot of dead body inspirational action in this.
Yeah, I did not realize how predictive your whale story was going to be. Yeah, carry my dead body at the head of the army and they'll be so scared that it will strike fear into their hearts and we'll defeat them. Okay. King Edward II, he does not do any of those things.
Come on.
He runs home and he spends like the next 7 years doing absolutely nothing.
That was a big missed opportunity.
Yeah, Edward II sucks and is useless and worthless and continues to be so for the next 7 years. Robert the Bruce consolidates Scotland. He fights this guerrilla war. He recaptures every Scottish city that had been taken by the English. And it's only when Robert the Bruce stops paying taxes that Edward II decides he needs to go deal with this.
Jeez.
So in 1314, Edward II marches north with the biggest army that was ever personally commanded by a reigning English king. So thousands of knights, the same longbowmen who had kind of messed up Wallace's troops before. Robert the Bruce only has 7,000 guys, maybe 500 cavalry. And Edward II has a massive force, humongous, right? Bigger than Edward Longshanks's force of 30,000. We estimated around 40 or 50, maybe.
Wow.
So he attacks, and Robert the Bruce has to face him. And this is where we get that Battle of Stirling from Braveheart, because Robert the Bruce has to fight Edward II. So he does kind of what the Wallace was doing, which is pick the battlefield. We're going to fight in this muddy, dirty bog and outside Edinburgh, very little ground for horses to run on. Everything that's there is like muddy and kind of bog, peat, and all that stuff. And so then on top of that, before the battle, he digs a bunch of pits. He digs a bunch of holes in the ground, puts spikes in them, and then covers them up with turf. So they're like pit traps.
Yeah.
Like punchy pits. Then he kind of just says to Edward II, like, come get me, come fight me. I'm over here. The same thing Wallace was doing. Hey, over here. Come charge through all of this like freshly cut grass.
don't mind the holes.
Yeah. And there's this great story that before the battle, Robert the Bruce is giving this speech to the Scottish, and he's giving some big, impressive pump up speech that you would have from like a king giving a speech to his men about duty and honor and all that stuff. But while he's giving this speech, some English knight, Sir Henry de Bohun, comes riding across the battlefield and challenges Robert the Bruce to a fight before the battle. Challenges him to like a duel.
Are they going to do like they're going to do the one-on-one, like your champion versus my champion?
Yes. Yeah.
All
and
right.
Robert the Bruce is 39 at this time. He goes out there with an axe, which I love. Like, you don't picture kings fighting with a battle axe, but he goes out there with a battle axe and decapitates the guy.
Oh.
And then that did it for the Scot. Now we're like, all right, now we're going to fight for this guy.
Yeah.
The speech wasn't really working for us, but that was pretty badass. And so this is where you get the thing where the English who didn't fall into those holes got really close to the Scottish, and then they picked up those wooden sticks. They called it a schiltron, whereas like they had it was just like a hedgehog formation where they would face every direction, so you couldn't get around behind the back of it, and you would just run into these big giant wooden stakes, and they would kill the horses, and then you kill the guy after he falls off the horse. And
impaling horses. Where's RFK Jr. when you need him?
That was one scene that I loved from Braveheart. Like there was like a horse was riding up on him, and he just chopped the horse's legs off.
Yeah,
I remember that being like very like kind of blowing my mind when I saw.
Well, it's like one of those things you always see these fights. It's like, just you. Of course.
Yeah.
That's what.
Why didn't I think of that? Why hasn't anybody thought of that before?
It's like in the movies when you always see like guys face each other one-on-one, and then all of a sudden you see a movie where like 6 guys, you're like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so Edward II's force is destroyed. They flee for their lives. Edward II barely escapes with his life. Some of his knights like have to fight him out of there, but he escapes. And Scotland remains independent for the next 400 years.
Not bad.
They only relinquish their autonomy when James Stuart, the King of Scotland, is crowned King of England and Scotland. And they just figured it'd be easier to combine everything.
There you go. It's like the Scottish win in the end.
Yeah, they do, right? I mean, I guess, and so they
win they get their independence, and in the long game, they took over England.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
They did eventually throw the Stuarts out, but that's hundreds of years in the future, right? Like,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, but and so that's William Wallace, and I guess by extension Robert the Bruce, just kind of this badass guy who was out to catch fish one day and ended up starting a revolution because he was so angry and just killed a dude with a fishing rod, and then inspired an entire country of people to kill dudes with fishing rods.
Yeah, there you go. Don't. So the lesson here is, don't take a man's fish, especially when apparently he's like 7 feet tall,
right,
and has a 5 foot long sword.
Just don't provoke this guy, right? Like, give me a fish, I'll give you half of them. No, I want all of them. And then he's like, I'm over here, come get me. Okay, I'm gonna get you. You better watch out. I'm coming to get you.
Yeah,
just repeatedly walking into doors over and over again.
It inspired a solid movie too, even if it's not entirely accurate. It
it gets the feel correct. I
The
feel
essence.
Like. I
It
feel
has
like it's
the
got the right
essence of it.
essence. Yeah, I
Correct.
like it. I enjoy it, and I thought
Yeah.
it was a good movie. So I have a couple of little epilogues here. Robert the Bruce dies of leprosy in 1329. And his last request, Edward the First's last request, was to have his dead body carried in front of the army. Robert the Bruce's last request, he's dying of leprosy and he's about to die. And he says, kill me and cut out my still beating heart and carry it on the next crusade to the Holy Land. So that's what they do. Sir James Douglas cuts out his heart and carries it to the next crusade.
Nice.
Yeah. Sir James Douglas is killed by the Moors during the Crusade in the Holy Land. But there's a story that like he's surrounded by Arab troops and they're fighting, and it's very clear that like he's going to die and the rest of his guys are going to die. And one of his final acts is to pull out Robert the Bruce's heart and like throw it at the enemy as they're attacking him. And then I'll tie off Edward II here too, and this is where I want to tie in is Isabella the She-Wolf of France, because she marries Edward II as kind of like a maintaining the peace between England and France kind of thing. But Edward, he doesn't like her, and he starts talking all this smack about her in public. So she gets mad and she responds by having all of his friends that she doesn't like, she has them all like arrested and imprisoned and in some cases executed.
Because she's got William Wallace's kid.
Right, because she might have done it with William Wallace. She probably doesn't like him, right? There was one guy that he was really good friends with, and she had him hanged, drawn, and quartered, like the same thing that happened to William Wallace.
I didn't realize that a queen had that kind of power to have people executed.
Yeah, well, so he didn't like it, and so he decided he was going to have her executed. So she went to France and married a different guy, and then came back with an army.
Whoa.
So yeah, she doesn't really have the power to execute his friends, but she does it anyway. She's the queen. The executioner is not going to say no to her. And anyway, he tries to have her assassinated. So what she does is she like flips it on him. She goes to France, gets a bunch of guys with her, comes back to England, has Edward II like captured and dragged out into a field, and allegedly is murdered by being stabbed in the ass with a red hot poker, like shoved up his ass until he dies.
That is some brutal.
Yes, you would never want to travel back in time. Yeah, so then she marries some other guy. Their kid, Edward III, is when he becomes old, she rules as regent with this other guy that she marries, this French guy that she marries. When Edward III is old enough, he takes over. And because Isabella now has this reputation of like the She-Wolf of France, she's killing everybody, right? She stabbed the king in the ass and all this. So Edward III is like, well, I got to do something because the people are kind of think of you as this homicidal maniac, but also you're my mom, so I can't really do too much. So he has her placed under house arrest on the palace grounds, so she gets to live the rest of her life in this very elaborate, English palace and the surrounding grounds. Edward III goes on to like be this big hero of the 100 Years' War. We could do an entire episode on him, but he's so badass, and Edward II was so not badass that's where you get the argument that maybe he was William Wallace's kid.
Guess it's a recessive gene, maybe.
Yes, yeah, I would argue the Longshanks. He's got a lot of Longshanks in him, but also the William Wallace comparison is fun, although English people don't like it.
You just need to, get a little ancestry DNA going on here.
Well, the thing with 23andMeing European nobility is that it's all just kind of one blob.
Yeah, they're all cousins.
Okay, so that's the whole story. That's the War of Scottish Independence. William Wallace, Longshanks, Robert the Bruce, Isabella the She-Wolf. A lot of awesome stuff.
Might be one of our most brutal episodes ever.
Yes. A lot of decapitations and decapitated heads being transported, which ties us back to
dead whales, butts being poked.
Yep.
Lots,
all kinds of fun stuff happening here. The Middle Ages, folks.
Yeah.
Medieval justice.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do like and subscribe. That does help the show out a lot. Share it with your friends and share it with people that you want to stab in the ass with a red hot poker. And
nice.
We'll see you on the next one.
Stay badass.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.